Hello and welcome. Here we are. This is officially day one of the Kindness in Business Challenge. And can I say, first and foremost, thank you so much to everybody who has joined us and taken part in it. And I am so excited and delighted that I've got one of my really good friends, Dr. David Hamilton, who's come to share his wisdom and kindness with us today. So thank you for giving up your time, David.
My absolute pleasure. I don't know about the wisdom bit. I'll do my best.
But you'll share a few words
I'll
with us,
share a
and we'll
few words.
see.
I'll go for the few words, and we'll see how we might describe it at the end.
That's it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Um, and just before we hit record there, I said something to you, which actually I just want to repeat for anybody who wasn't here live. Um, Today has been the first day of the challenge, and we were asking people to say thank you to someone who'd helped them on their business journey and say a heartfelt thank you. And David, you're definitely one of those people who's helped me. You've come along and participated in so many things, and it's always a joy to share time with you. But there's another person that was connected to us that I thought about first thing this morning, who is one of the kindest people I've ever met, but she's no longer with us, and that's Margaret McCarthy.
Yeah.
And it was actually Margaret who, it was through Margaret that we originally
Mm,
connected. And I woke up this morning and I had, I was just thinking of all the people that I wanted to thank. And Margaret was always there for me around,
mm,
helping with stuff. And particularly when we were doing the big Happiness Day events. I remember her phoning up everybody she knew in the press, basically, to try and get some coverage for what we were doing with that big event. So much so that we got to be on the front page of the Scotland and Sunday newspaper, and we got a mention in the Scottish Parliament.
amazing. Yeah.
Um, so I thought of her. I actually heard her speaking to me, saying, "I'm not that far away." We just kind of have the soup together these days, but she's in what Callum and I talk about, even now because we're connected, is the big soul soup pot
Yep.
of consciousness. So she's having some soup with Callum up there just now,
Mm.
kind of, and
And
definitely being part of this kindness
and there was
challenge.
always soup on in Margaret's kitchen as well. Margaret had a huge influence on me
Yeah,
actually from the early days, for my right up until she left this world.
yeah,
Margaret
yeah,
always, she was, I was very close to Margaret and she had a huge, really influence, even from those early days, in the way that she was always, I guess this is about gratitude, in the way that she was always supporting me and always
yeah,
bigging me up, always helping me to believe in myself. And I think helping a person to believe in themselves is probably one of the biggest things you can ever do for a person in life.
yeah,
We sometimes think, even when kindness, we think about the physical things that we should do. And the mind sometimes goes to have to be kind of, we think of grand gestures, but in actual fact, I think helping someone to believe in themselves is probably hitting right at the core. And it
hmm,
plays a huge role then in what a person then can become.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Margaret was a huge champion for me, literally from before I even put pen to paper writing a book.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you, Margaret. We're sending you some love today,
Absolutely, thank you,
and,
Margaret.
and remembering you with a whole lot of kindness and laughter, because that was the thing that you always laughed whenever you got with Margaret. So I shared last night. We had a little event last night, and I shared my sort of story with kindness and all the things that happened to us, particularly after Callum died. The stuff that was in that book, um, and um, and how I had taken that and just it created a bit of a thread, a golden thread for me, I would say, into all the things that I've done from what I was doing with the Happiness Day work through into what we did with indie authors. So what I'm curious about, David, I don't think we've ever really discussed this, is what is it about kindness that really captivated you? Because for the last few years, that's been a core focus of your work.
Eh, I would say, well, a number of things really. I was surrounded with kindness when I was growing up. And I
Mm,
remember feeling so many times that my mum was so kind. She still is. My mum's still with us. Uh, but I remember sometimes being moved as a child and as a teenager, thinking that my mum is just so kind. She'll do anything for her
Yeah.
loved ones. And
Hmm.
so I found myself as a teenager thinking a lot about kindness, not just thinking a lot about what my mum did for family, because everything was so family focused.
Yeah.
It was more about actually we begin to think about kindness itself and why that matters. And when I became a research and development scientist, that began to expose me to a whole load of research that no one really knew about, to be honest. This is why I actually started writing books, because I thought, no, how did no one knows about this kind of stuff? Because it's buried in medical journals, sociology journals, psychology journals. And so I started pulling it all together as a from a scientific
Hmm.
perspective. But that really, if I'm honest, that is what switched me onto it. Later, when I first wrote a book on kindness, it was because I'd come across some research after having written a couple of books already. In fact, the book that you showed a few minutes ago was my
Yeah.
first book on kindness.
Yeah.
And the science that first came to me on that was I'd been looking in one of my previous books about the science of meditation.
Hmm.
And I'd put some aside that didn't fit exactly with that particular book. And it was a piece of research looking at using a kindness, compassion based practice called loving kindness or metta.
Yeah.
And what they'd measured was an anti inflammatory effect in the body as a consequence or a side effect of cultivating a mindset of compassion and kindness. So I started looking into why that actually happened. And that became the basis of a book. In fact, there's a chapter in that book about the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
And it's really the vagus nerve is so tied to our natural capacity to care, but it's also one of the major anti-inflammatory, systems of the body. There's something called the inflammatory reflex, which is governed by the vagus nerve, and so which means inflammation is actually impacted by a heart full of compassion and kindness. And when I first came across that research, I literally nearly fell off my chair. I
Mm.
couldn't believe it
Hmm.
because kindness was always a huge inspiration for me. It never occurred to me that I could write a science-backed book
Yeah.
on kindness.
Yeah.
And so my early experience, which meant it was always something I was conscious of, and
Yeah.
then coming across that kind of research, that is how I came to begin writing on kindness. And just over the last 5 or 6 years, far more research and really heavy duty research has become available that is what caused me to write other books on it, because there's just so
Yeah.
much more available than there was even 10 years ago.
Yeah. And what I love, David, is you are definitely that bridge between, the science that is in the heavy papers and the, Joe or Jane blogs on the street who, is never going to read that unless you're Jen Wilson. Jen Wilson reads all these science papers, she's a radical. But most of us don't, so you're able to just take all of that and make it accessible for people. Which
Yeah,
is
I
why
think
I've always been such an advocate of your work about all stuff. I mean, I've given away so many copies of, why kindness is good for you, why and how your mind can heal your body and all that sort of stuff to try and get people going, okay, you might not necessarily kind of go all there, but here, yeah, start with this because you've got such a grounded attitude. I think that it really helps people,
Well,
which is,
I'm glad you said that, Kim, because can I tell you how I came to start writing like that?
uh-huh,
When I wrote my first book, if I'm really honest, the kind of imposter syndrome and the self-esteem issues were very much prominent in the surface of my consciousness, despite the fact that I'd a lot of what people might consider to be achievements. I had my PhD, I'd worked in research and development, but
yeah,
that's what you call external stuff.
yeah,
But and if your sense of self-esteem is based on those things, then, it can be challenging, because if something happens in the outside world, it can become a real issue. What we actually need is internal self-esteem. And so when I wrote that first book, because I had so much imposter syndrome and because I had so much issues with being taken seriously and self-esteem, I made the first draft really complicated,
right,
only because I wanted people to think I was clever. So I put lots of big words in, scientific words. I actually made some, believe it or not, I look back and I think, what was I thinking? But I actually made some explanations more complicated on purpose because it made me sound intelligent. And I thought everyone who reads this book will think, how clever is that guy? Until I asked my mum, the first person to look at any of my words, I asked my mum to read my book. She didn't even make it past the first chapter. As she said, you know, son, I think you're doing a great job here. I don't know how you can write books, but I just didn't understand it at all the big words. And that was absolutely humbling. Because here
Hmm.
I had left my job as a research and development scientist to write on and speak about things that I was passionate about. And my mum couldn't understand the book because I'd made it too complicated. And that was a wake up call. And from then onwards, my passion became how to take seemingly complex subjects and make them so accessible that my mum
Hmm.
and my dad and my Auntie Jean,
Yeah.
none of whom have gone on to higher education, can read these books and go, God, I really understand. I remember my mum understanding the mind body connection. I remember her saying, God, I understand now how our states of consciousness can impact how our genes behave. Wow. When
Yeah.
she read the actual final draft, when I made it really simple and accessible. And hearing
Yeah.
my mum say that, I was, oh my God, that's amazing. But
Yeah.
that was a humbling thing. And it's about just, what am I doing this for? It's to help
Uh-huh.
people. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's to help people.
Yeah. And that's, I suppose, it's part of your journey, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
thing. It's part of our journey to really come into our own shoes and to settle in with ourselves, which is kind of the book that you wrote about, the I Heart Me, I Love Me. And I
yeah,
know that you've shared that that was probably the most challenging one that you did
yeah.
because you were then faced with having to explore what it's like, even to be kind to yourself then.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was a major challenge for me at the time.
Yeah.
That was the most challenging book for me to write, but also the one I'm most proud of for
Yeah.
that particular reason, because it led to a massive transformation. Me forcing myself to write a book on self-love meant I had to learn how to love myself. And it's the longest I've ever taken to write a book because it took me so long to learn how to love myself more enough that I was happy to tell the world what I thought and what
Yeah.
to feel that I've got something now important that I could say. And it
Yeah.
took me 2 years of research and writing to feel that I had something important to say. So that's why I feel that book was transformational to me. Anyway,
Yeah. And I think to a lot of other people. So.
thank you.
So I want to kind of come into this whole notion then about kindness and business, right? So Big Soul Network, we are a business network, but with a bit of a difference. We also say we're a landing pad for awakening souls. So
I love
we've got
that.
four principles that I shared last night. I think, and as Jill had mentioned in the replay I just saw, probably for the first time people have actually heard me say this. So it's amazing how much is in here but hasn't actually managed to get out here yet. So we are kindness, joy, wisdom, and wealth in
Hmm.
that order. I think if we're kind first, we bring some more joy and happiness into your life. We share the wisdom with each other, and then we generate wealth. And that wealth is not only in monetary terms, but the wealth is in our connections and the people
Hmm.
that were there and our emotional well-being and all of that, contributing
Hmm.
to our
I
wealth.
love
So
that.
so that's what I'm doing in Big Soul Network, and we're exploring a whole lot of magical mystical things along the way. um but when we think about business and kindness, they're often not things that sit together.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people will talk around, you need to be really competitive to be, successful in business. You've got to be ruthless, get in there get in there first, do somebody down, I mean, you think of the apprentice and like, yeah, you're fired, you're no good, that there's no kindness around
Hmm.
that. So, you know, do you think there's a place for kindness in business? And, what do you think the impact if we actually were more kind would
Yeah.
really have in the
The,
business world?
there is a huge role for kindness in business because we are human. And kindness is it's a core human value. So whatever environment we find ourselves in, there is a place for kindness because we are human. And something I've talked about a lot is, kindness in business or say in even leadership roles, it doesn't mean that you have to go all softly and ignore your targets and goals. It doesn't mean that you have to be overly lenient or avoid tough decisions. it simply just distills down to an approach that's rooted in empathy and compassion and a genuine concern for the feelings, the needs, the opinions, and the well-being of other people. And if
Hmm.
we start from that place, that space of genuine empathy and compassion and a genuine concern for the feelings, the needs, the opinions, and the well-being of others, then however we act or react or respond in any given situation, depending on the context we find ourselves in, it will evolve directly from that space. But if we start from that space, we're always going to be going in the right direction. We might not always get it right because we're human
Hmm. Yep.
and we can only try our best. But if we start from that space, then I think we'll always go in the right direction. And even when it comes to, something I've heard a lot, people thinking there's a difference. Surely we've got we've got to meet targets. We're judged by the numbers. Then how can there possibly be a space for kindness here? Well, the challenge is if we're under relentless pressure all the time, we introduce stress,
Hmm.
overwhelm, burnout. You may well lose people from the organisation, and any large company is well aware that what's the cost of replacing someone you've lost? What, half to twice their salary? It's good, make good business sense to retain people. And lots of research shows you retain people better if you have a culture that's actually open about kindness. And think about it, people perform better when they feel supported, when they
Hmm.
feel that someone believes in them. Now these are all expressions of kindness. So
Yeah.
if people feel supported and you believe in them and you're there for them and you're saying thank you for things. You're praising people's efforts. You're acknowledging people's opinions. You're doing all these seemingly small things. Then
Hmm.
people will actually be the best versions of themselves, and then you'll actually meet your targets without having to be cutthroat. In fact, you'll probably do even better because people do actually perform better when there is that safe psychological space that
Hmm.
only compassion and kindness as a culture can generate.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I totally get that. When we're working here with a lot of small businesses, it's maybe, one, two people maybe in their business, maybe a small handful of kind of associates, maybe sometimes to help us. So maybe the retention aspect is not as important for
Mm.
some of the people connected here. But I suppose the kindness and compassion and how you approach anything that you're doing so that the people that you're serving are going to feel that as well in terms of your how you interact with your customers and how you interact with other businesses that you're connected to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree, Kim.
Um, but one of the things I think that's maybe then a concern is if as this challenge, I'm getting people to kind of step a little bit out of their comfort zones with things, and maybe to highlight other businesses who are doing really well and the potential of if I share the spotlight on someone over there, is that mean I'm going to lose something from myself because some if it's potentially a competitor, somebody else that's offering a service in the same way, and you suddenly go, they're doing something great. What do you think that there is, in terms of the ripples of kindness, would that counteract perhaps some of the fear that's there? Is that something that we could explore?
Yeah, definitely. There is a huge ripple effect of kindness. It happens actually in a number of different ways. But I think when you're willing to help someone else, to shine the spotlight on someone else, that doesn't just stop there. What you increase the likelihood is that person themselves will also take that genuine feeling from you, that experience of kindness. Research shows that when you help someone else, it generates a state that sociologists now refer to as elevation.
Hmm.
And elevation is a broad term. We used to call it just helper's high. It's the high you feel when someone helps you, right? Someone's kind,
Yeah.
you feel, or you're kind to someone else. Sorry, you feel helper's high. But now there's more to it, and some people experience it in different ways. Now it's more referred to as elevation. There's an elevated state. What studies show actually is if you help someone feel elevated because you've helped them in some way by shining the spotlight, they will almost certainly pass that on and do it for someone else, either the same thing or something else
Hmm.
based on how they're feeling. Or very oftentimes they'll reciprocate and do something for you, whether right now or maybe further down the line.
Yeah.
And I think the more we do these things, the more we actually put this, call it positive vibes out there, or whatever you call it, whatever you
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But we put something out there that almost certainly will always come back. Maybe not in exactly the same form,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what we're actually doing is we're making the world a better place. And even if we just do that and say, well, it doesn't matter if I don't get something back. Let's
Yeah.
maybe just for now I try not to think about that, and I just do this because it's the right thing to do. And I think the more we do that kind of thing, the more things seem to come back and assist us in
Yeah.
the same or different ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's been my philosophy all the time ever since I came into to running my own businesses. And, I've run a couple of business networks and been involved in stuff, for a lot of times over the years with things. And the networks that I never got on with was we'll only allow one person in that trade to be a member of this because we can't have anybody else that's a competitor of them because, you're it basically. You're the you're the big one here and that's all. And I was like, but surely it makes sense to collaborate with other people, to get to know those that are actually working even in the same field as you. Because as a customer of something, you're going to look and say, well, who is it that you resonate most with? And I've always been, whenever I was talking to anybody about like doing books, for example, I would say to people, there are other people provide the same services that we do. So, maybe I'm not right. And there's times when I've said, I don't think we're right for you, but I can suggest somebody else perhaps that you go to. So that's been my kind of experience of, yeah, being willing and open to do that. But I think it's then if it actually, you have to step away from the fear that there's not enough in the world.
Mm. And so Kim, see if I was a customer of yours and you said exactly that,
Hmm.
I would almost certainly want to work with you because what I do immediately sense is someone I trust.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think, well, in this world, we'll always want to work with someone we trust. And right away, I could tell from what you were saying and the absolute genuineness with which I know you mean what you just said there. I would absolutely be wanting to work with you
yeah,
because I trust you.
yeah. So that's the thing when we're trying to cut through all of the yeah, yeah, we'll use the technical term crap that's on
Technical term.
that's out there on social media, and saying, like be this, do that, shine yourself as this kind of thing. Um, it's that truth and authenticity that we really are looking to connect with somebody, isn't it? And that
Yeah.
when you really do kind of make that connection, then that's the bit for me is like, well, yeah, you've got your people, and you know that whether you would buy from them or you would recommend them or all of that sort
Yeah.
of stuff. So,
And that kind of stuff also affects your mental and your physical health.
mhm.
When you get that little connection from helping someone, it has huge effects in the brain. It actually dials down the activity of stress regions of the brain at the same time, simultaneously dialing up the activity of positive mood and happiness regions of the brain. It's why kindness makes you feel good because it's not just that it feels sort of nice. There is a physical effect in the brain. There's two physical effects in that context. One that's dialing down the physiological effects of stress and dialing up the physiological effects of happiness, joy, positive mood states. At the same time, actually impacting your heart by changing blood flow, by widening your blood vessels and reducing blood pressure. In fact, some recent research just absolutely blew me away. Researchers got people to do, they randomized 179 people
Mhm.
approximately into three groups. One group, they said, do three kind things per week for people. So do three acts of kindness per week for 4 weeks. So 12 acts of kindness over a period of 4 weeks. The other group, they said, do three acts of self-kindness per week for a month. And the third group, they said, just note three events per week for a month as a control comparison group. Incredibly, they took blood samples at the beginning, at the end, and what they found, only in the group who were kind to others, who did those acts of kindness to others, there was an impact on the genetic activity of circulating immune cells in the blood, called
Wow.
leukocytes, white kind of white blood cells.
Yeah.
And when I say impact on genetic activity, there's a set of genes, and probably people don't need to know the technical name, but I know some people are. They're called CTRA, or conserved transcriptional response to adversity. And basically, the way that those genes were impacted is it meant a reduction in inflammation in the blood and
Right.
a bolstering of natural antiviral viral capacity. Isn't that incredible? Only
Yeah.
from the group who did something kind for others. Here we had a genetic impact on immune cells circulating in our blood. Isn't that absolutely extraordinary? Now, it didn't mean in the group who being kind to themselves that's not beneficial. It just that's beneficial in the sense being kind to yourself is beneficial psychologically and also for regulating your nervous system. But there is something physiologically unique about helping other people, physiologically unique in the sense that it has a physical effect on your heart and your blood vessels, and a physical effect on through in your immune system. But isn't that absolutely extraordinary? It's like
Yeah.
nature saying,
Yeah.
this is how
This
we're
is
supposed to
supposed
be.
to be.
We're
Yeah.
supposed to be kind.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
this is how we're supposed, and it's nature's, I call this nature's reward.
Yeah.
Nature is rewarding us, in a sense, for acting in ways that help all of us to flourish as a species. We are here today because we have kind genes. We have genes that are associated with the natural human tendency to care,
Yeah.
to have empathy, compassion, and to express that caring in physical or verbal acts of kindness. So we have genes that are at least 100 million years old in the human genome. And what that means, that the fact we still have them, is they're absolutely crucial for the survival, but also the flourishing of the human species. So the reason why there are deep genetic and physiological, neurological effects of kindness is because nature is basically saying, yes, this is how we get on. This is how we survive and flourish as a species, by helping each other out. And here is the biological proof of that. Because when we don't, what we get in place of kindness is stress. When we not being kind, the stress center of the brain tends to be more active. And kindness and stress biologically are biological opposites. When kindness increases, stress comes down. The real solution to resilience is kindness, because
Mm-hmm.
kindness literally combats stress at the neurological level. And it's like a seesaw. When kindness goes up, stress comes down. When kindness goes up, stress doesn't mean if you're kind, you don't get stressed.
Yeah.
What it does mean is that against the backdrop of life as it happens, then you have a bit more, I guess, computing power, so
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
speak, that
Yeah.
allows you to manage some of the stressful situations of life.
Yeah. Jen's asked a question that I think, and I know that she's got to scoot off early. So, um, can you speak to the difference between people pleasing and kindness?
Yeah. So there can be a difference.
Yeah.
You can be pleasing people because you genuinely want to,
Yeah.
right? But if you're pleasing people because you're just pleasing them for the sake of thinking that I'll be judged otherwise, then that could be stressful. And so therefore, what we sometimes have to ask ourselves is, am I doing this because I want approval, or I think I should, or I'm concerned about the consequences, I being, verbally abused or something, or being, whatever, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
not pleasing people. And if that's the case, then for the sake of my own mental and physical well-being, I have to find a way of practicing self-kindness. And sometimes self-kindness can mean saying no, or creating healthy boundaries. It doesn't need to be a hard no. It can be a softer no. Maybe at some other time. I have other commitments right now, maybe at another time, for example, but it doesn't have to be that hard no. So I think there's a line, and at one end of that line, we have an abundance of energy and resources and time, and we're able to be present for other people in the ways we want to be. We're able to do our jobs really, really well. At the other end of that extreme, we're exhausted and we're burned out and we're tired, because we're giving so much, or we're working so hard, and we're not doing other things that support our mental and physical well-being. We're also doing everything for other people, sometimes because we think we should or we have to. And I think somewhere in between those two extremes is a sweet spot, or a sweet area, that's
Mm-hmm.
different for different people because it depends on your life. And
Yeah.
it's also different at different times in your life. And during in that sweet spot, you know that it's important to normalize self-care. And you actually normalize it. And what I mean is you recognize at these times that I have to do something to support my mental and my physical well-being. But you've normalized it enough that it's a habit, that you're actually building it into your day or your week so that you don't fall away down towards that place where you might feel tired or stressed or burned out. And that sweet spot or that sweet area is where you're aware of when I need to practice self care, but it's normalized, it's become part of your regular thing. But you've also identified what are the things that I can do for myself that
Mhm.
support me. And that might be creating healthy boundaries, it might be saying no, or it might simply be taking time. You know, one of the things I do, I put a wee note in my, I put an entry in my diary, it says meeting with self. And what I'm doing, I'm elevating that up to the same visible level
Yeah.
is having a meeting with someone else. If someone needs my time, I'm usually able to find it somehow by moving things around. So by making it visible for myself, I'm what I'm saying is I value my own mental and physical well-being, and I'm willing to do what it takes for that. And that meeting with self could be 5 minutes. It could be 5 minutes to do a meditation. It could be 10 minutes. It could be half an hour. I sometimes use or 20 minutes to read a wee section of a book. And I have a book beside my desk that I just dip into in my wee meetings with self. And I just flick through. Sometimes it's not unknown for me when I'm really busy to take an hour out during a busy day to watch an episode of Star Trek, just because
Yeah.
that works
Uh-huh.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's when you know what to do and you do it on purpose, it becomes an act of self-care or
Hmm.
self-kindness.
Yeah. Yeah. Jen's very good at that, I think. I know that she's got some um, great wisdom and things that she can share with other people. And I'm hoping that, we can, she can kind of share some more of that in the network soon again, I think, with people about what they can do. Um, Jill, I know that you'd raised your hand. Did you have something that you wanted to ask? So, yeah, unmute yourself then. We can, yep.
Hi, Fab. Yes, yes, yes. Hi, David.
Hi, Jill.
We have met before twice, but I'll not go into where and when. It was one. This was
I,
a really long time ago.
I did think you looked familiar.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't know where from.
All right.
I just assumed it had something to do with my long standing connection with Kim.
Actually, no, it's got nothing.
Oh, really? Ah,
So we physically, the last time we physically met was down at oh my God, I can't remember the place where Joan Francis and Mary Taylor White
oh,
had
remember that?
that event
Yeah.
thing that they
Was that
had
down in Ayrshire somewhere,
down at
wasn't it?
Ayrshire. I forgot
Yeah.
Morrison's,
Yeah, yeah.
the riding equestrian place. But I've met you before. I went to one of your early things. I mean, early noughties in the 90s. I can't even remember.
Ah.
Anyway, I can't even remember. It was in the country, and it was anyway. Don't remember. Irrelevant to what question. But yes, we have met before. Nice to see you again.
You too.
Um, uh, so it was when you were talking about the research there, and about the genetic response thing. What was coming to my mind was, see, I'm a student, of Dr. David Hawkins, which you probably are
Yeah.
completely familiar with, the map of consciousness. And what I was curious about was the people involved in the likes of these studies and stuff is like it's like what level are they starting at in some respect? Because Dr. David talks about that 78% of the population operate below integrity. Now, this was 20 years ago when he was writing those books, that therefore their level of consciousness is above 200. And I wonder if that what's your thoughts or comments or thinking or ideas potentially that the effects that you're talking about, which obviously completely are valid, is that what levels of consciousness are these people operating at? So
Yeah.
another way of thinking,
Yeah.
what are their values? Do
Yeah.
they operate below integrity? Would they still get that same result, or are
Yeah.
they above and at certain levels? Do you see what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
non-tangible aspects
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
of a measurement.
from
Thanks, Jill.
from from the people that I've met who are researchers in areas of kindness and compassion, they seem to be really lovely people.
Mhm.
And I think it's because they are motivated with letting the world know about kindness and compassion. So they're drawn to areas of research that help them to get a message out, help them to say, this is, the world could do with knowing more about kindness and compassion. So the handful of researchers that I have personally met or come across or interacted with who are publishing research in this area all seem to be very high integrity. And I think they're already drawn to this type of research because they seem to be motivated not just from a scientific perspective in doing science, but also wanting to help to get a message out that these are the kind of things that can, this subject is something that can actually help the human species in some kind of way.
I was actually not even thinking about the researchers. I was thinking about those involved in the studies. So I totally get that you would need to be interested in that area. So you're going to be that. I'm actually thinking about the subjects
The
that they then measure.
volunteers.
I actually think of the participants. That's
Yeah.
really who I was
Yep.
thinking about more than the actual scientists,
Yeah.
as to whether in their selection processes, is there like, do they when they take people on to do it, is it like just Joe Blogs off the street with
It
nothing
pretty,
else?
Mm-hmm.
pretty much is.
It's
Yeah,
pretty much that. So there's
it's
no like
random.
psychological questioning about your
No,
values or anything like
no,
that.
no, no, no nothing like that. Because actually, scientists sometimes struggle to get enough people.
Of course.
So it is pretty much anyone who
Okay.
responds sometimes to an advert.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
mm,
There is sometimes, depending on the study, there might be a small selection process. Like, for example, if you're doing a cardiovascular thing and you need healthy people, then you will select for people who are healthy, who don't have any past history of things. But most of the time, it really is just
mm,
very who responds to the advert because we need as many people for statistical reasons
mm,
as possible.
mm.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks,
yeah.
Jill.
Mm,
I've just got a couple of things I wanted to move
yeah,
on
yeah.
to. So if that's, but thank you so much for your
Thank you.
So
question. So, yeah, I I wanted to kind of come round to a couple of things that I think of others sometimes find challenging. So, for me, I think of kindness as the language of the soul,
me too.
and that allows me at times to look at the human, the person in front of you who might not be acting so kindly, and allow me to kind of just have a little bit of, okay, I can if I think if I can think of your soul connection and the soul pit that's in there, then I can send some kindness, but I might not like what you're doing, what you're
Yeah,
saying, and how you're acting.
yeah,
Um, and that, if we think about how people sometimes can be in a business setting, and there's lots of stuff that goes on that we might not like, it's trying to how do we kind of like put that into some sort of context that, yeah, I can accept that you are a soul, I do want to be kind to you, but what you're doing and how you're behaving, you might have stolen something, you might be misinterpreting yourself. I know you've experienced this yourself where people suddenly pretending to be you. How, I mean, is kindness then the right response? And what do we do in those sort of
yeah.
circumstances?
It depends on the context, and there's a few different ways. There's different ways I approach things depending on what it is. The first thing I try to reach for is that thought that you never know what someone's dealing with
Hmm.
behind closed doors,
Hmm.
and that might not, and what that might not change the situation that you're presented with, but it might change how you feel about it. And it might change how you feel about the person. It might even change then how you communicate with the person, in which case you might get a different result from if you go in hard, so
Hmm.
to speak.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I start with that thought is because I really understood that a few years ago. I lost my dad a few years ago. He'd had a brain tumor, and I was on the way to take him for his radiotherapy, and I almost had a car accident because I was so in my head. I was rushed. I was late, and I was worrying about my dad, and I almost crashed. And me and this gentleman rammed our feet in the brakes at the mini roundabout. I expected a loud horn and a mouthful of expletives,
Mm-hmm.
maybe an obscene finger gesture. Instead, he looked at me. We were only like 2 meters apart because our cars were so close at the near collision. And he looked at me and his face softened and he said, "It's okay, on you go." And he put his hand up and it was a kind gesture and a kind face. I drove around the corner and burst into tears
Yeah.
because it was like a release and all the worry and fear came to the surface. And I really understood. If he had have honked his, peeped his horn, swore at me, I don't think I could have coped. Because despite the front I put to the world, I'm still doing interviews, I'm still giving talks at events, I'm still making social media posts and videos, writing emails. I was fragile on the inside, but nobody knew because my dad was a private person and outside family and friends, nobody knew.
Yeah.
So I didn't make that public. So I understood that day that to always err on that side first, be kind, because the reason a person's presenting the way they are now, you never know what they've had to deal with in the past that's conditioned them or what they're dealing with now. As I said, it might not change the situation, but it will certainly change how you approach the
Mm-hmm.
situation, and then you might get a different result. You might then have what I've experienced is you seem to have more psychological strength to communicate in a way that you might not have been able to before. Because if we start from the place of, I need to tell this person they're wrong, or maybe they're not good enough in
Yeah.
something, maybe their performance isn't good enough, then some people might shut down.
Yeah.
Some people might resent it. Some people might go the other way. Some people might actually say, okay, great, I needed to hear that. But I think most people will probably resent it or shut down. So, but if I have that bit of psychological strength where I'm saying, I understand, I'm willing to start from that place. You never know what someone's dealing with. Maybe they've got a sick parent. Maybe one of their kids is struggling in some way. You don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
if I start from that space, I sometimes feel that I have more psychological strength than I had if I didn't
Yeah.
start from that space. And then what I say and how I say it is tempered with empathy and softness. And I'm looking, my mindset is now, can I help? Again, it depends on the situation. You
Yeah.
know, obviously, if someone stole my identity or
Yeah.
stole something, it's a different thing. Because then what we need to do, this is one of the points I'd like to make as well, and I think you were alluding to this as well, is that approach doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, if it's a repeat thing, sometimes you've got to turn it around and say, for the sake of my own mental and physical well-being, I've got to be kind to myself.
Yeah.
And that might mean leaving this situation, or it might mean having a much stronger conversation than I might have done in the past. It might be, talk people, impersonating. I've twice gone to the police.
Yeah.
I've not done it all softly, because I've had twice gone to the police with people impersonating me online
Yeah.
and taking advantage of people, or by pretending it was me.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you've got to say, well, what do I need to do for my own mental and physical well-being? And that might not be interpreted as kind
Mm-hmm.
by that person. I thought you were all kind. But
Yeah.
it's still kindness. It depends. Kindness is multifaceted, and different people will see the same action in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, you've got to be content yourself that what you did is what you believe was the right thing or the kind thing. And that kindness could be for someone else, or it could be as a way of protecting your own health, and it could be the kindness to yourself. So this is what I mean by it depends on the
Yes. Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, that is the bit. I totally agree, and will often try to see. For me, I kind of look at the bigger picture of things. That's really where I come from. I mean,
Yeah,
I
you
would be the
always
world's
have.
most worst editor ever, right? Because detail, I'm like, oh no, give me the big picture, which is so. Whenever I'm looking at a situation and you see conflict or something happening somewhere, and I'm trying to look at the perspectives from other people. It's that kind of try and kind of look at, well, why might they, come at this from this angle, or why might somebody come at that from that angle, and try and find some sort of consensus in there. I suppose it comes back to my old HR job, and I used to say I needed a blue UN peacekeeping helmet then, because you were often trying to kind of reconcile issues on both sides. Um, but it's not an easy place to be, and a
No.
lot of people, and I think this is one of the things you were saying about kindness, how much kindness would shift in the world if we could all maybe take a little, a little bit of a step back, because we seem to have gone into the I'm right, you're wrong, and therefore none of, there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
And being able to look at that, whatever's going on, that you might say that doesn't agree with my values, that doesn't align with where I am, and being able to be kind and maybe remove yourself from the situation or whatever. But also, just how do we get this message out then to people that they could that it would help, that all the stuff you've said, it helps your own well-being, it helps you physically, mentally,
Yeah.
you can make such a difference in the world, but we can see so much that is really unkind going on,
Yeah.
and that's a real challenge.
Yeah. Absolutely. The first thing I try to do, and I don't get it right all the time, and I think what most of us should try to do is lead by example, by just being the best version of ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, the most, I guess, the kindest version of ourselves. And also part of that, treating ourselves with self-compassion, knowing that we might not always get it right. We might not even make the right decisions. A lot of the, half the time, more than that sometimes. And so just trying to be an example the best we can. And secondly, one of the main reasons that I gather all the research on kindness and write books on it, and why I make so many social media videos and do so many posts and write about it, is because I'm trying to get that message out into the world in the only way that fits best with my skill set.
Yeah.
Other people have different skill sets. Some people are really good at marketing stuff. That's never really been my thing. Probably why my books have never really sold very many copies. But comparatively, but the reason why I do it is because I'm trying to get that message out. That's why I gather that information, because I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe that if we try to live by some of the principles that you talked about as your core values for your business, if we try to live by some of these principles, then we can make the world a better place. It might not solve every problem in the world,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
suppose it solved enough of them. Let's imagine if people took a kindness approach and we solved 10% of the challenges and conflicts in our lives. I mean, that's 10% would be absolutely massive.
Yeah.
It'd be enormous if we could just solve 10% of the conflicts and challenges in our life by simply trying a compassion, kindness-based approach. I think 10% is not too big a thing to aim for, but it literally could be life-changing for a lot of people. It could be world-changing
Yeah.
for company-changing, world-changing, really. And so with these even not so adventurous goals, that's why I try to gather the information. For me, my skill set is to use science
Yeah.
to as part of my way to communicate. So that's why I do it the way that I do it, because I'm really just trying to feed this information out enough that people will take it and apply it in their own way, using their own skill set,
Yeah.
and and hopefully make a difference for my own wee corner of the universe.
Yeah. And I'm thankful that you are doing it, because the fact that you are allows me to go, I don't need to know all the science, but I can recommend a good book.
Yeah.
I can recommend somebody, I can have a conversation with you and bring you in here where,
Mm.
like you say, other people, are then going to look at this, and between what we're talking about and for me, just the little challenges we've put in this week, just
Yeah.
different things to kind of step out of their comfort zone, put little bits of action, things that are going to take them no time at all.
Yeah.
But hopefully that same thing, it starts to just have a little bit of an impact.
Yeah.
And
And you're right, Kim. It's these little things that matter, that have the
yeah,
impact, because
yeah,
it's the little things that we do most often.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's the frequency of these things, and the what we think is a little thing. I mean, I wrote a piece. I send a weekly Better You Back by Science email out, and I sent one this morning uh, on the surprise called "I Like Your Hair," the surprising science of compliments. And
yeah,
one of the things I was pointing out is research studies show that we hugely underestimate the impact of a seemingly small compliment that you give someone. Because what we see is someone saying, "Oh, thank you," and then we think that's it. What you don't see is the cumulative effect that has on a person for the rest of the day, for hours and days afterwards. That actually lights up in their brain. If you had a wee portable MRI scanner, what you would see is that lights up the same part of their brain as if they've just received a physical gift, even a financial gift. And they get a wee hit of dopamine that keeps surging back over and over and over again. So the mind just keeps bringing us back to that compliment, and it begins to have a cumulative effect. And that simple little thing that
Mm-hmm.
you've done as part of this kindness week is say pay these little compliments and saying these little things. What you don't see is the actual much bigger effect than you possibly realize that that has
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we overestimate the what the thing we overestimate is thinking that people will be uncomfortable with our compliments, but they're not. Studies show we hugely overestimate how uncomfortable we might make a person feel, but that's not the case at all. It's the exact opposite. It's the
Yeah.
exact opposite. Compliments actually have much greater impact, especially the small things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you're talking about here. That
Yeah.
these massive impact.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, because that encourages me to keep going with what we're doing with this. And we had a little chat last night on the call we were doing about being able to receive. So what you were saying about, that, so somebody passes on a compliment, because often the thing is, oh, like, oh, I like somebody would go, oh, I like your sweatshirt. Yep, noticed it. Um,
I love that.
yeah.
I did. It's the first thing I saw today when you
I
signed
know,
on.
just, but the often thing is, oh, this old thing I just got at such and such a place, or we downplay some of the things that when people are offering us, whether it's a compliment or actually being offered something physical. And I'll give you an example of this, which is an amazing experience. I was on a flight, and I know you've had lots of things happen to you, right, magically now. So I was on a flight last year, going down to London, sat beside someone I didn't know, and we had the most amazing conversation, right, for an hour on a flight. So many connections. Um, we were both a very deep spiritual conversation we had, about souls and connection. And her son's birthday was the same day as Callum's, but he was a year
Wow.
older. He would have been a year older, but it was the
Oh
same
my
day.
God.
She was talking about him. She could have been describing Callum about how her son Tim was. We had such just things in connection. She comes into her bag and she pulls out this stuff and she hands me this little knit crocheted smiley face. And the bag says cultivating kindness on it, and these little crocheted badges that somebody else had given her, and she said had when she was traveling had said to her, give these to people that you think deserve a smile award. Now,
Oh,
I gave out Smile Awards as part of the Happiness Day stuff,
so
and we
you
did
did.
all that stuff for ages, right? So, and I'm going, right, now this woman was actually from the States. She was traveling, she'd been in Scotland and then was off away going to Turkey or whatever. We were both doing a 500-mile walk challenge because I was in the middle of my challenge I was doing last year. She was going off to walk 500 miles. The synchronicities were incredible,
Wow.
right? 2 weeks ago, I'm getting messages from her saying, I really need to speak to you, Kim. When can I speak to you? Now, we've connected on Facebook, but that's it. We've never spoken again. 2 weeks ago, we then have a conversation, and she said, I want to pay for you to come to Florida. She lives in a town called Celebration. I want you to come to Florida. I'm going to pay for your flights. Come and stay with me. I want to introduce you to people that I work with. She works with a charity over there called Give Kids the World, which is just helping kids that are, it's like a Make-A-Wish type thing, that are life limiting. And I really want to promote your book and to help people find out about you. And I was like,
Incredible.
and my first thing was, oh, how do I accept this? And I really had to kind of go away and think about it.
Mm.
And then go, right, okay, yes, there is a reason that we're going to do this. And so I have accepted and I am going to
Good
Florida in
for you.
April.
Good for you. Good for you.
But that, just that thing about being somebody who can
Mm.
often easily be kind to other people, but being able to accept it when somebody is then offering you something which seems such of value.
Yeah.
Um, but there's just such it was such an amazing experience and such a magical story.
Yeah, God, that's absolutely incredible. The synchronicities, the fact it even started out as the same birthday.
Hey, same
I
birthday.
mean, what's
Yeah.
that all about? And the fact the Smile Awards, I remember you doing those
Yeah.
years ago. That's
Yeah.
incredible, isn't it? Wow. Well, good for you. I hope you have an amazing time in
So
Florida.
yeah, and I don't know what's going to come from it. I'm of that. It's of that. I think there's going to be some conversations about Big Soul Network because my
Mm,
vision for Big Soul Network is that we have hubs of people all around the world meeting in person. We're all connected online, but they're meeting in person and we're all talking about
mm,
kindness, joy, wisdom, and
yeah,
wealth.
good for you. Brilliant. I love it.
Um,
Absolutely amazing. And good, that's a good vision to have because you're spreading wee ripples of kindness.
yeah,
You're giving people a chance to, a space or a place to hook up and
yeah,
converse and share similar values and help each other out.
help each other out. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm so aware of the time. We're obviously just about 3 o'clock, and I know how busy you you are just now. You've been kind of chasing your tail, I think, by the sounds of it.
The last couple of months has been, I get through these wee phases where I think everybody's like this, I suppose. You get clusters when you have periods of time when you've really got lots of space, more free time than you sometimes get, and then you've got other times where it all lumps together. Life would be easier if everything was just equally spaced apart, but life doesn't really work like that, does it? So the past couple of months for me has been just everything seems to have clustered in the space of 2 months.
Which makes me even more grateful the fact that you have given your time for us today, and just come
Always.
along and just connected.
Well,
It's
you've always been a great friend, a great supporter over the years. So I'm very happy that you even considered uh, asking me to chat today.
Well, thank you so much. So I think we'll wrap it up there for everybody. Thank you, David. If anybody wants to go and check out his books, definitely. I love this one. I love them all, but yeah, the joy of actually giving up is absolutely the perfect. It was the perfect title, and I love everything that you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, and if there's any way us in the community here can spread your books, even make sure that everybody buys them. I keep saying I should have been on commission for the amount of sales that we've actually tried to do over the years, but yeah, we'll keep spreading the word. And thank you so much for your time and all your efforts into making the world a kinder place.
It's been my pleasure, Kim, and thank you for all your efforts making the world a kinder place. So nice to see
Thank
you
you.
again.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks,
That's
you.
great.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Brilliant.
Right, I'll stop. Thank you so much.
Well,
And